How's it going, YouTube? It's Elliot Plays here. Welcome back to channel. Welcome to my January wrap up, guys. Last video of my January TBR. I said I was going to read 5 books in the month of January, but I ended up reading 7. So that's good. So I'm on track for my 80 books for the year. So yeah, I'm getting there, guys. I'm on track. I'm 1 book ahead of the schedule for the month, so that's really good. So I'm going to go through the books that I read in January and give my ratings and opinions on them. So yeah, let's get into it. So the first book I read was The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. This is about a university group called the Maidens, and they're above like everybody else. To see themselves as above everybody else because they're the clique who's the best, like the popular kids. And that's run by one of the tutors that teaches at the university. That's his Maidens, because he teaches Greek tragedy. So he's the one that set up this group, and then something odd starts happening. The maidens start getting killed off one by one, and the first maiden to die has a friend in the university, and that friend in the university has an auntie who used to go to the university. So she rings this auntie who used to go to the university, obviously devastated and crying that a friend has been found murdered. So obviously the auntie who's a therapist comes to support her niece and try and figure out what's going on and how these murders are happening. So she starts to investigate. She suspects the teacher has something to do with it, who's created the maidens. So she's trying to find evidence against the tutor who set up the maidens, because she thinks he's the one that's committed these crimes, but she needs to find evidence to take it to the police who are investigating the crime. But obviously he keeps getting the better of her, and he's like, well, it wasn't me, so you've got no evidence and you can't prove that it was me, because I had alibis every time these women were murdered and things. So there is a twist to it. I'm not going to spoil it. There's a twist to it, and we actually find out who the culprit actually was. It could have been the teacher, it could have been someone else, but you won't know unless you read the book. I did unfortunately give this book only 3 stars because I just felt it took too long to get to the point, of who it was. You didn't really find out who it was until the final chapters. I just felt it dragged on too long to find out who it was, and then once we did find out who it was, it just came to an abrupt end really quickly. So it kind of ended in a chapter, and it was just done. It was oh, okay, that's it, over, and that's who it was. Okay, cool. So yeah, that's the reason I only give it 3 stars, but I liked it. It was worth the read, but for me, it was only a 3-star because of them reasons. It took me a while to read the book as well. I wasn't really that drawn into it. I wasn't really that invested in the story, so to speak. But it might be different for you guys. You might enjoy it, so I would still recommend giving it a try and seeing what you guys think. But for me, it was only a 3-star, so yeah. The next book I read in January was The Hiking Trip by Jenny Blackhurst. This was about a woman called Maisie who had arranged to go on a hiking trip with her best friend, but her best friend, being unreliable, cancels at the last minute, but she still chooses to go on this hiking trip. And when she gets to the campus to get on the bus to take them to the start of the hike, meets this brother and sister called Sarah and Rick, and they are having an argument about something, so she goes over to introduce herself to them, and then they tell her the reason the argument is because Sarah has lost the money for them to pay for the bus to get to the hiking starting point. So she offers to pay for their bus money, the bus trip. So they kindly accept the offer, and they start to form a group together, and they start to go on the hiking trip together, and yeah. And then things start to get intense between the group as they start to get further and further into the hike, because Maisie and Rick sleep together, and for some reason that makes Sarah jealous. So yeah, Sarah and Rick have an argument, so Rick goes off on his own, and Sarah and Maisie carry on together. And when they get to another campus, they do the Coca-Cola, the classic Coca-Cola. They do that, and then Sarah goes off with one of the guys from another group that they've met at this campus, at this camp sort of thing. So she goes off with a guy in the woods, doing things. And then Maisie kind of follows her to apologise for the tension that's been between them since she slept with Rick. So she goes to do that, and then she sees Sarah being attacked, but she doesn't remember it clearly because she was, you know, high on this Coca-Cola. So she was high on Coca-Cola, and she doesn't remember who exactly attacked Sarah and killed her, but she just remembers it happening. So the guy from the other group that they met gets convicted of the murder, because she has to give someone up, because she was there and witnessed the murder, and she's the one that called the police. So she has to give someone to take the fall. So yeah, and then it takes her to 2019, I think it is, because this happens in 1993 or something. I think the hiking trip happens in 1983, so then it takes her to the present of 2019. It switches between the two. So it switches to 1993 to tell you a bit about the story of the hiking trip and what happened. Then it switches to a girl called Laura, which is probably one of the people who was on the hiking trip who've had a change in identity sort of thing. And it's about them going back on the story and what happened. And they find like the body of someone near the hiking trail, so it starts to freak Laura out. And again, there's a big twist to this story, and it came towards the end yet again. I gave it 4 stars, and the reason I gave it 4 stars was again because like it was like cleared up with a chapter, so it led up to all this suspense and all this thing, and then it was just like, oh, okay, cool. Then it ended, but I did give this book 4 stars, and I really did enjoy it. It's really worth the read, guys, so yeah, I would highly recommend that book as well. Okay, guys, the third book I read for January was The Little Teashop in Tokyo by Julie Kaplan. This was a really, really good read. I really enjoyed this one. This is about a blogger who wins an all-expenses-paid trip to Tokyo to take photographs to include in the exhibition, and she's going to be mentored by one of the most famous photographers in Tokyo. But unfortunately, he cancels last minute when she's there, because he has a family emergency. So someone else steps in for him to be her mentor, but it's a guy that she used to know from her past. He was a tutor at the school she used to go to, and she kissed him when she was a student there. And yeah, it didn't go down well. Everybody thought she was a bit of a, you know, the F word. So they all hated her till the end of school, and her life was a misery at the end of school. So it's like, he doesn't remember her at first, but then this trip starts to go and he starts to remember her. But he's been in Tokyo for quite a while, so he's like made a name for himself, so he's really famous. And he photographs like this model called Yumi, who also lives in Tokyo. He's starting to fall in love with Yumi, but he mistakes her wanting to be with him all the time as love, but she doesn't. She just wants to be with him because he's the only person there that she knows, and the only person that'll spend time with her and drop everything just to come and be with her. And she knows that, so that's why she's basically using him, but he doesn't see it as being used. He mistakes it for love. But yeah, Gabe's totally clueless, and like I said, he doesn't want to do the mentoring. He doesn't have any interest in helping Fiona do her project. He's just too hooked up on this Yumi and getting the attention from Yumi that he's mistaken for love. But then as the trip starts to progress, he starts to remember Fiona and who she was, and then he starts to rekindle feelings back for her. So yeah, it's like a steady burn romance, and it's really sweet. The characters are fantastic. I really loved all the characters. I really connected to the characters in the story, and it was just a really, really sweet little story. Like I said, I'm not normally one for romance books, but this was a really, really good read, and I really enjoyed it. So I was stepping out my comfort zone to reading this book, and I did give it 4 stars, so it's well worth the read, and I really enjoyed it. So if you read it, I hope you enjoy it too. But that's my third book I read for January. And the next one I read was Deadly Tempers by Hannah Hendy. Yep, Hannah Hendy. This is about a group of kitchen workers who work in a high school in a quiet little town. The 2 main characters are Marjorie and Clementine. They're like the dinner ladies in the little group. And one night, one of the group of one of the kitchen staff gets found dead. Marjorie and Clementine find it all a bit weird on how she was found and why she was still there that late at night on a Friday. So they take it upon themselves to try and solve the murder. So when they they think it's a murder, so they're trying to solve this crime. And as they start getting closer and closer to the truth, things start happening to them, like the brakes get cut in the car and like weird notes start getting left for them and things. So they start trying to put the clues together because the police don't believe the word they're saying. They just think the two batty old ladies who are trying to solve a crime, you know. It's just, they just write them off as like just being crazy. So yeah, and then like again with this book, it was like a slow build up to the main point of the story and who it actually was, and then it just ended in like a chapter, and I was just like, bruh. And it just like ends in like the chapter, like you find out who it is and who was behind it all and who left the notes for them to find out who actually was the murderer and like all the clues and stuff that they got left. And then it just ends abruptly in one chapter once you find out. It's just like, oh, okay. I did really enjoy the story. It was a good story, like it was funny in places. The characters were really lovable. The two little old ladies were lovable. Again, I gave it 3 stars because it just took too long to get to the point, and it just, I don't know, it just took too long to get to the point, and then it was just like a lackluster ending. It was just like, oh, cool, that's where it ends. But yeah, I gave this one 3 stars, and that was Battlenet Detectives, guys. The 5th book I read was Keep Them Close by Sophie Flynn. This was a fantastic read, guys. This was one of my 5 stars for this month that I read. This is a fantastic read, very, very good. So this is about a woman who goes through postnatal depression once she has her twins. So she signs up to a forum of mums called Mums Online, and she's like obviously tells them all her worries and troubles. She says some pretty harsh things about her husband and her kids, but obviously it's the postnatal depression talking, so she doesn't actually mean any of the words that she's saying. She's saying them under this depression. So she becomes really close to one particular person on the website, and she shares the most darkest secrets of that one person in private DMs. The website starts to take over her life too much, and it makes her become more ill and more depressed, and like she starts to neglect her husband and her kids. So she makes the decision to come off Mums Online and delete her account. With the secrets that she's told this person in private DMs, who she hasn't a clue who they are, they're holding it against her, and they don't think the girls are safe with Emily. So they're trying to do everything they can in their power to get the girls away from Emily. So she makes it out like Emily's going crazy. So she does all these things like send her postcards and ring the girls at school to say that, oh, they want to be pulled out of it and things like that. So she does little things, and then when Emily's like, oh, that wasn't me, I'm not doing these things, people just start to think she's crazy. And that's that she's getting ill again with postnatal depression. So they think she's getting depressed again. So they don't believe a word that she's saying about this person, this mysterious person on Mums Online. They don't believe a word she says. And it was just a really, really good story. I could not put this book down. I was so invested in the story, so invested in the characters. I just really could not put this book down. And that's why this was one of my 5-star reads this month. So guys, I highly recommend picking up this book if you can. So pick this book up. Definitely. Okay guys, the 6th book I read was What We Didn't Say by Rory Dunlop. This is about a couple called Laura and Jack who met when Jack was a tutor at Laura's school, and they fell in love with each other and obviously got together and created a life with each other. But both of them, as it progresses, feel like they're both, like, each other are being unfaithful to each other. So Jack thinks Laura's being unfaithful, Laura thinks Jack's being unfaithful. So they decide to split up for 2 years. They split up for 2 years and file for divorce, but the divorce doesn't actually happen because they still love each other, they still miss each other, and they just need that time apart to reconnect and like sort their minds out, you know, sort themselves out, and then try and get together and sort it out. So during the split, Jack sends Laura a diary that he had wrote when she left. Kind of explains his side of the story of like why he thought she was cheating and things like that, and how it all led up to that point. And then Laura adds her thoughts in along with it to explain her side of the story, and then sends her back to Jack. But yeah, after 2 years they meet, because Jack's ready to forgive, but Laura isn't. But she's still willing to meet him and get their points across. To be honest, all this could have been avoided if they just communicated with each other. You know? They just didn't communicate with each other. That's the whole point. That's the whole reason this happened. They didn't communicate with each other. And they left this diary to their 18-year-old, their son, for when he turned 18 to explain this part of their life. I don't know why they want to leave that part of the life to him, but they did, because Jack had prostate cancer. He beat it the first time, but then it came back. And unfortunately, the next time he didn't beat it, so he leaves the diary to his son. I gave this book 4 stars, mainly because the characters really annoyed us. I couldn't connect with the characters. It was just like, they were just so petty and so jealous, and it was just like a he said, she said sort of thing. So you don't really know what the real story was and who was telling the truth, but in things like that. So it was just like, well, okay. Yes, I'm just petty. Just talk. Just communicate. This could have been avoided. What are you doing? But yeah, I didn't connect with the characters. I connected with the story. The story was really well written. It was really good. But the characters just really annoyed us, and that's why I gave it 4 stars. But if you think it sounds interesting, do pick it up and give it a read. It was quite an interesting book. So yeah. And the last book I read was And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer by Frederick Backman. So this is about a grandpa and his grandson, Noah. The grandpa has got Alzheimer's, and he's trying to explain to his grandson, Noah, that his mind is slowly deteriorating and that he's losing his memories. He's losing the ability to remember who people are. And he's saying that soon he won't remember who Noah even is. And Noah's taking it really well, and he's like, well, yeah, Grandpa, if you forget me, then you can re-know me again. Like, you could get to know me again, because I'm a really cool person to get to know. And he's just taking it so well, and it's really sweet, but it's so heartbreaking just learning of how much the grandpa's struggling with everything. Like, how much he's struggling, that he's going to forget his wife and how he met his wife. How he's going to forget that he even has a grandson. How he's going to forget that he has his own son. Really heartbreaking. It's a really small book. I think there's only like 36 pages, but it's a really heartfelt read, and it just tugs on the heartstrings. I gave it a 5 stars. It made me cry, but I gave it a 5 stars because it was just such a heartwarming little story, and it just shows you how badly the struggle is when someone gets Alzheimer's. Because I kind of can kind of relate to this story, because before my father passed away, he started to go down the other route, and he got dementia. He started to develop dementia, and he started to forget, like, my name and my mum's name and things like that. So I can kind of relate to the story a bit, so that's why it tugged on my heartstrings even more. It just reminds us of my father when he was going through his dementia phase and before he passed away. And it was just like, yeah. But I highly recommend the read if you want a good cry. But yeah, it was a really, really nice read, and I really do highly recommend it. But that is my 7 books that I read in January, guys. Some really good reads there. 2 5 stars, and the rest were like 4 and 3s. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed my little recap of what I read for January. If you did, please don't forget to smash the like button down below. Subscribe to the channel for so on. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out, guys. See you tonight. With the audio.